I am the real heiress of the Sterling family. It wasn't until I died in poverty in my past life that I realized I was actually the biological daughter of Arthur Sterling, the billionaire tycoon. After my death, a mystical system bound itself to my soul, offering me a second chance at life. When I was reborn, I went to the Sterling family and initiated the DNA test myself. But the moment I returned to the family, Chloe, the fake heiress who had stolen my life, left a suicide note and jumped into the ocean. She died, instantly becoming the untouchable, tragic golden girl in everyone's hearts. And I, the biological daughter, became nothing but her miserable shadow. My parents wept, demanding to know why I had to come back and ruin everything. My brother, Julian, cursed me, asking why it wasn't me who died instead. Even my husband, in our most intimate moments, would whisper her name. Now that my 5-year quest had failed, the system told me it could grant me one last wish before I died for good. I smiled faintly. Then bring their precious Chloe back to life. The system was silent for a long time. Can't you do it? Chloe didn't actually die, did she? I asked. Clara, are you sure about this? The system's mechanical voice sounded almost sad. I exhaled slowly, my voice cold and resolute. I'm absolutely sure. I was done begging for their fleeting affection and love. The living can never compete with the dead, even if that dead person was actually alive and hiding somewhere. In my past life, I was worked to death at a young age, tortured and exploited by my adoptive parents. After my death, my soul lingered. I heard my adoptive mother, Mrs. Miller, sighing with relief, saying that I was finally dead and could no longer pose a threat to her real daughter's future. That was when I discovered the truth. I was the Sterling's real daughter. My biological mother had gone into premature labor, while vacationing in our small town, sharing a hospital room with Mrs. Miller. Seeing how incredibly wealthy my mother was, Mrs. Miller secretly swapped our baby tags. My spirit drifted to the Sterling mansion. I watched the fake heiress living a life of luxury I couldn't even dream of. Her bedroom was larger than my entire childhood home. Her walk-in closet was overflowing with designer clothes. She wore beautiful gowns, carried herself with elegant grace, and had a private chauffeur to take her everywhere. And my biological parents and brother absolutely adored her. I couldn't help but think, asterisk, if only I had grown up in that house, they would have loved me just as much, asterisk. That was when the system bound with me. It offered to let me start over, but with one condition. I had 5 years to make my family and my husband truly love me. If I succeeded, I could stay in this world. If I failed, I would die permanently. I accepted the deal without hesitation. How could such a warm, loving family not love their own biological daughter? So after being reborn, I took the initiative to find them. When my mother saw my face, so strikingly similar to hers, she broke down in tears of joy. But during my grand welcoming gala, Chloe left a tragic note and threw herself off a cliff into the ocean. I wish Clara all the happiness. Let me, the one who stole her 18 years of luxury, pay for my sins with my life. From that day on, everyone blamed me for Chloe's death. My parents grew cold and distant. Julian hated me for murdering his beloved sister. But I hadn't done a single thing wrong. Later, my father forced me into an arranged marriage with the Vance family. Every fiber of my being wanted to refuse because Tristan Vance was originally Chloe's fiancé. But I had spent years walking on eggshells, too terrified to speak up. To my surprise, Tristan agreed to the marriage without a fight. It had been 5 years since my rebirth, and I had been married to Tristan for 2. Yet, in those 2 years he had never given me a single warm look. My time was running out. If I couldn't get my family or my husband to love me, I would disappear forever. I grabbed Tristan's sleeve just as he was about to walk out the door. Can you just say you love me? Just once. His dark eyes stared down at me, turning icy cold before he violently shook my hand off. Clara, you are truly disgusting. You know today is the anniversary of Chloe's death, yet you stand here demanding I say I love you? Have you forgotten I was supposed to marry her? The woman I wanted to marry was never you. You stole her place and took things that never belonged to you. Don't push your luck. But I didn't force him to marry me. The marriage was a business merger between the Sterling Group and the Vance Group. It was purely for profit. He married me for money, so why was I the one carrying all the blame? I was his wife. I just wanted to hear him say he loved me. Was that really such a crime? I just want to see what kind of magic Chloe has that makes my family and my husband hate me so much. So bring her back. I wanted to see if they would feel even a shred of guilt when their precious Chloe appeared before them. Perfectly fine. Very well. I will grant your wish, the system replied. I lay lazily on the lounge chair, trying to rest, when my mother called. She immediately started yelling at me, demanding to know why I hadn't gone to Chloe's grave to pay my respects. She said I owed her this. For the past 5 years, this day had felt like a public execution. I would be dragged out like a criminal while they wept over their memories of Chloe. I have things to do today. I'm not coming, I said coldly. The line went dead silent for a few seconds. She couldn't believe that I, who had spent years desperately trying to please them, had actually rejected her. I didn't have many days left to live. Why should I go back and let them treat me like garbage? Besides, their beloved Chloe was coming back anyway. But my refusal to play along didn't mean they were going to let me go. The next afternoon, Julian burst into my house, trembling with rage. Clara, why didn't you come home yesterday? You made Mom cry her eyes out. The fury in his eyes was so intense it looked like he wanted to burn me alive. I just stared at him, my expression completely blank. My lack of reaction only made him angrier. I hate this fake, emotionless act of yours. Stop pretending. Do you have any idea what yesterday was? It was Chloe's death anniversary. You killed her 5 years ago, and you don't feel a single shred of remorse? You knew Mom would be devastated, and you didn't even bother to come back and comfort her. You don't deserve to be Mom's daughter. You aren't even worth a single hair on Chloe's head. Why couldn't it have been you who died? Listening to his harsh words, I remembered how much it used to hurt. I used to cry and beg for his forgiveness, trying everything to make him like me. I wanted him to protect me the way other brothers protected their sisters. But 5 years of coldness had completely frozen my heart. I was done coddling them. After all, Chloe was on her way back. Suddenly, a sharp, stabbing pain flared in my chest. It was happening so fast. In my past life, this was the exact time I had died of bone cancer brought on by extreme exhaustion. Since I had failed the system's mission, was my body reverting to its cancerous state? I clutched my chest, my face turning deathly pale as cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Clara, cut the act. I'm not falling for your pathetic drama, Julian sneered. I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, mocking sound escaping my lips. Wow, you're so smart, Julian. You saw right through me. You're right. I did it on purpose. I deliberately stayed away to ruin Mom's day, and now I'm pretending to be sick just to annoy you. I lifted my chin, looking at him with a spiteful glare I had never shown before. Seeing how miserable and angry you all are, it actually makes me incredibly happy. If I had known this would be so much fun, I wouldn't have spent the last 5 years acting like a kicked puppy. It's such a pity that a horrible person like me is still alive, while your precious, perfect Chloe is rotting in the ocean. I curled my lips into a cruel smile. Jumping off a cliff. That must have been so terrifying and painful. But honestly, she got off easy after stealing my wealth for 18 years. Slap. A stinging slap landed squarely on my cheek. My face burned instantly, and my ears started ringing. Julian's face went pale. He stared at his hand in shock, a brief flicker of regret crossing his eyes. His mouth opened slightly, and for a split second, I thought he was going to apologize. But the next moment his arrogant, defensive mask slipped right back on. He pressed his lips together, looking down at me with disdain. You brought this on yourself. You know Chloe is a topic you never touch, yet you deliberately brought her up to provoke me. With that, he turned on his heel and slammed the door. Feeling the fiery pain on my face, I finally lost my battle with tears. To say it didn't hurt would be a lie. I had desperately wanted a brother's love. I remembered my childhood neighbor, Lily, who had an older brother. Whenever it rained, he would carry her on his back. When they walked, he would hold her hand. And whenever their parents scolded her, he would stand in front of her, shielding her. Every time Mrs. Miller beat me, I would pray to God that I had a brother who would protect me and stand by my side. But when I finally got a brother, Julian coldly told me that he only had one sister, and her name was Chloe. That was when I realized not all brothers were created equal. Still, I had tried so hard to please him. When Chloe died, Julian was so devastated he couldn't eat or drink. I stayed up all night to bake his favorite chicken pot pie, only for him to smash the dish onto the floor. You will never replace Chloe. Don't you dare touch her recipes. Only Chloe is allowed to make this for me. The scalding hot gravy had splattered all over my arms, breaking out into painful blisters. Tears had welled up in my eyes from the pain, but Julian had only sneered. It was just a little splash. Stop acting so dramatic. Who are you trying to manipulate? Back then, I had lowered my gaze, telling myself that he was just grieving the sister he had lived with for over a decade. I shouldn't hold a grudge. As long as I kept treating him well, he would accept me eventually. But it was all just a foolish delusion. Some hearts are made of ice, and no amount of warmth can melt them. In my sleep, I felt a soft sigh brush against my ear. Then a cool, soothing ointment was gently spread across my bruised cheek. Why do you have to provoke Julian? You know his temper is always terrible around the anniversary. You've behaved yourself for 5 years. Why start trouble now? I opened my eyes to see Tristan sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a tube of bruise cream. He clearly already knew what had happened. Tomorrow, I'll take you back to the Sterling mansion. I'll make Julian apologize to you, Tristan said. Looking at his hypocritical face, I let out a dry laugh. Why are you pretending to be the good guy now? You're no better than Julian. If you loved Chloe so much, why didn't you jump off the cliff with her? Everyone says she died because of me, so why did you marry her supposed murderer? Oh right. Because of the Vance Group's profits. It was a business merger. Since you married me but treat me like garbage, making me live in her shadow every day, you're actually worse than Julian. Do you have any idea how disgusting it is to watch you perform your tragic, loyal lover act in front of me? Tristan stared at me, frozen, as if he were seeing me for the very first time. I provoked him further. Do you want to know why Julian slapped me? I leaned closer, my eyes flashing with absolute coldness. I told him that Chloe deserved to die. I said she got what she deserved, that her death was Clara. Tristan growled, his hand wrapping around my throat, squeezing tightly until my face turned red from lack of oxygen. See, Chloe was their sacred goddess. No one could mention her, no one could criticize her, or they would turn into monsters. He suppressed his rage, his eyes wild. What is wrong with you today? You already have everything that belonged to Chloe. Why can't you just be satisfied? What more do you want before you stop acting up? Acting up. A slight display of self-respect was considered acting up to him. Maybe because he saw how much I was struggling to breathe. He finally let go of my neck. I gasped for air, coughing violently, then looked at him with a mocking grin. What do I want? What if I told you I want you to say you love me? There was still time. If even one of them said they loved me, I could live. Tristan pressed his lips into a hard line, his eyes turning cold and dismissive. His silence spoke volumes. I burst out laughing, tears streaming down my face. His silence meant, *, you stole Chloe's husband. How dare you have the audacity to beg for my heart? *, Tristan, I really want to see the look on your face when you find out. I cut myself off, staring at him with deep amusement. No, it would be much more fun if he discovered the truth himself. Find out what? He demanded. *, find out that Chloe isn't dead. Find out why she staged her suicide. *, but I didn't say a word. Ever since Chloe died, I had lived under a mountain of guilt. I kept asking myself if my return had truly driven an innocent girl to commit suicide. During my darkest moments, when I was on the verge of taking my own life, the system had intervened. Chloe Sterling is not dead, it told me. She ran away with the school's bad boy, Derek Cooper, because she was pregnant with his baby. She was too terrified of ruining her perfect image in front of her parents, so she didn't dare confess the truth. But she also wanted to punish me, so she played a brilliant final hand. She staged her suicide on the day of my welcoming gala, escaping with her lover while leaving a note that ruined my life. I truly couldn't wait to see the look on Tristan's face when he realized his beloved pure, white angel had actually run away to play house with a deadbeat. Clara. Maybe the mockery on my face was too obvious. Tristan's expression darkened. You don't deserve to speak her name. Every single day you draw breath, you must remember that you are the reason she is dead. You owe her for the rest of your life. Tristan left, his face like stone. Just like Julian, this was the first time he had ever seen me fight back. That night, the excruciating pain returned. My bones felt like they were being pierced by thousands of tiny needles. I curled into a ball on the bed, unable to sleep a single wink. At dawn, I threw up a mouthful of blood. I asked the system how much longer I had. The system, which had spent 5 years with me, sounded like it was on the verge of tears. Less than 2 weeks. Clara, don't be sad. I wasn't sad. Before I came back to this family, I was filled with hope and excitement for the future. But these past 5 years of being treated like a murderer, of enduring their cold glares, had completely drained every ounce of hope I had. I actually regretted my choice. I should have just stayed dead in my previous life. I opened my bedroom door, and Tristan was standing there, his hand raised as if he were about to knock. It was rare for him to look for me so early. Let's get a divorce, I said flatly. Tristan's lips went pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. What kind of game are you playing now? I don't want to live with you anymore. You don't love me, so why keep torturing each other? Don't even think about it. You are never leaving me, he snarled, turning and storming off. Right after he left, Julian arrived. He told me Mom was sick and demanded I come back to the Sterling mansion immediately. As we walked out, Julian looked down at me, his eyes filled with a cruel, smug satisfaction he couldn't hide. Julian had a reason to be smug. Ever since Chloe's death, our mother had been plagued by severe anxiety and persistent fevers. She was constantly trapped in nightmares, and no doctors could find a physical cause for her fevers. Later, a spiritual medium told the family that this was a sickness of the soul. The only way she could heal was if the person who caused her grief repented. Mom's grief, of course, was Chloe. In her fever dreams, she would scream Chloe's name, weeping and apologizing, saying she regretted ever bringing me back. She cried that she had let Chloe down. So every time Mom fell ill, I was forced to kneel at her bedside, forbidden to stand until her fever broke. Over the past 5 years, I had lost count of how many times I had knelt there until I fainted from exhaustion. But this time, when I walked into Mom's bedroom, I stood straight and kept my eyes lowered. I didn't kneel. Our father, Arthur, glared at me with pure rage. You ungrateful brat. Why aren't you on your knees? Your mother gave birth to you. Have you no conscience? How can you stand there and watch her suffer? I remained silent. My father grew even more furious, raising his hand to strike me. Julian stood by, watching the show with a smirk, mouthing silently, "Apologize to me, and I'll help you." I gave Julian a cold look, then voluntarily went down onto my knees. Whatever. I would kneel. The sooner I died, the sooner I could escape this wretched place. I never wanted to see these disgusting people ever again. We were living in the 21st century, yet they still believed in spiritual curses. Or maybe they didn't believe it at all. They just wanted a scapegoat, and I was the perfect target. In the past, even when I was punished, they would at least feed me. But this time, Julian only sent up 3 bowls of plain watery congee a day. I wasn't some weak-willed girl who thrived on scraps. I knew this was Julian's doing. In the past, he would sneak in at night and let me rest. But this time, Julian stayed in the room, watching me through the night. His arrogant eyes seemed to say, "Beg me, and I'll let you rest." I didn't give him a single glance. My knees had already gone completely numb. I closed my eyes and forced myself to think of happy memories. But no matter how hard I searched through both of my lifetimes, I couldn't find a single moment of genuine happiness. From the moment I could remember, Mrs. Miller had treated me like a pack mule. Whenever I wasn't at school, I had endless chores. And whenever she missed her real daughter, she would lock me in a room and starve me. After returning to my biological family, I thought I would finally be happy. Instead, I had plunged into an even darker abyss. I had spent 5 years tiptoeing around them, begging for just a tiny drop of love. But they couldn't even give me that. I couldn't win over a single one of them. I felt like an absolute failure. Sometimes I wondered if I was just fundamentally unlovable. Tristan actually showed up, but he only gave me a cold, passing glance before going to talk to Julian about Mom's condition. He didn't offer a single word of concern for me, his wife, who had been kneeling on the hard floor for days. "I told you not to be too soft on her. Look what she's become. She actually thinks she can replace Chloe." Julian's mocking voice drifted over. Tristan let out a sharp, sarcastic laugh. "She could never replace Chloe. She isn't even in the same league." Julian purposely raised his voice so I could hear every word. "She spent years shamelessly begging for our attention. She even tried to bake chicken pot pies for me just like Chloe did. It was pathetic. She's like a thief who stole Chloe's family and Chloe's husband. Now that a few years have passed, she's finally showing her true ugly colors. So my years of careful devotion were nothing but shameless begging, and disgusting to them. This was supposed to be my family. How was I a thief? And marrying Tristan was never my choice. If he hated it so much, he could have refused. Why take his anger out on me? Look at her, pretending to be pale and victimized. Who is she trying to fool? Since falling ill, my entire body had been racked with constant pain. I was completely exhausted, yet they actually believed I was faking it. Tristan sneered, walking over and looking down at me. "I'll give you one last chance. Apologize to me." I slowly lifted my head, my face devoid of emotion. "Please sign the divorce papers as soon as possible." Tristan's face contorted with rage. He grabbed my wrist, pulling me up roughly. "Clara, stop throwing these tantrums. Why do you think you got to marry me in the first place? If Chloe were still here, do you think I would have ever looked at you?" He squeezed my wrist tightly, his voice dripping with venom. "You better take those words back right." Before he could finish his threat, my body reached its absolute limit. I coughed violently, and a dark spray of blood splattered onto his expensive shoes. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor. "Clara, what's wrong with you? Clara, why are you spitting blood? Stop pretending." How hilarious. I actually heard a note of panic in their voices. My body felt weightless as someone lifted me into their arms. Almost at the exact same moment, frantic, ecstatic shouting echoed from the hallway outside. "Chloe is back. Miss Chloe isn't dead. She's alive." The darkness that pulled at my consciousness was cold, but the voice echoing from the grand staircase was blindingly bright. "Chloe, my baby. Oh God, my sweet girl." My mother's shriek, the same woman who had spent 5 years claiming her soul was too sick to rise from bed, sounded remarkably healthy. Heavy, frantic footsteps thundered down the hallway. Tristan's grip on my arms loosened instantly. He didn't check my pulse. He didn't wipe the dark, metallic blood from his expensive Italian leather shoes. He simply let go. My head hit the hardwood floor with a dull, hollow thud, my vision swimming with black dots as he spun around. "Chloe." Tristan's voice trembled, filled with a breathless, reverent awe I had never heard in the 2 years I was his wife. Beside him, Julian practically shoved past my slumped body, nearly stepping on my fingers as he sprinted toward the door. "Chloe, you're alive. Dad, come quick. Chloe's home." I lay there on the cold floor, gasping for shallow breaths, my chest burning like a furnace of liquid needles. Through the narrow gap beneath the doorway, I could see the chaos in the grand foyer. There stood Chloe. She wore an oversized, cheap trench coat over a faded floral dress, her hair slightly messy, her eyes wide and rimmed with red. She looked like a tragic, weary angel returning from the dead. Mom. Julian. Tristan. Chloe wept softly, swaying on her feet as my mother threw her arms around her, weeping hysterically. I'm so sorry. I was so scared. I didn't want to ruin Clara's life, so I ran. But I missed you. All so much. You foolish girl. Why did you jump? Do you have any idea how much we suffered? Arthur Sterling's voice cracked with tears as the ruthless billionaire wrapped his arms around the girl who wasn't his blood. Tristan stood a few feet away, his body stiff, his eyes locked onto Chloe as if he were staring at a miracle. Nobody looked back toward the master suite. Nobody remembered the real daughter, lying in a pool of her own blood 30 feet away. Except for Thomas, the old family butler who had served the Sterlings for 40 years. He stepped quietly into the room, his face pale as chalk as he saw me curled on the floor. Miss Clara. Thomas gasped, dropping to his knees beside me. He pulled a white handkerchief from his pocket, hurriedly trying to wipe the blood from my chin. Oh dear Lord. Mr. Julian. Mr. Tristan. Miss Clara is spitting blood. Down in the foyer, the weeping stopped for half a second. Julian turned his head toward the room, his eyes dark with irritation. Thomas. Stop shouting. Clara is just playing her usual attention-seeking games because Chloe is back. Tell her to get up and stop embarrassing herself. Yeah, tell her to stay in her room, Tristan added, his voice cold though his eyes darted nervously toward my open door for a fraction of a second. Don't let her ruin Chloe's return. I let out a soft, wet laugh against Thomas's handkerchief. Thomas. I whispered, my voice barely a thread. Call an ambulance. Don't call theirs. Old Thomas's hands shook as he pulled out his cell phone. Yes, Miss Clara. Right away. Please hold on. Downstairs, the happy reunion continued. They carried Chloe to the living room, pouring hot tea, wrapping her in cashmere blankets, fussing over her as if she were made of glass. And in the quiet, dim bedroom upstairs, I lay alone, watching a dark, stubborn stain of blood dry on the polished floorboards. The system's voice chimed softly in my mind. System alert, target Chloe Sterling, has successfully re-entered the world. Line. Mission earning true love failure status. Permanent. Remaining host. Lifespan. 11 days 14 hours. 11 days I thought, closing my eyes. That's more than enough time to watch the show. By the time the city paramedics arrived through the back service entrance, I was completely numb from the waist down. The paramedics were horrified by my condition. My body weight was barely 80 pounds, my blood pressure was dangerously low, and my knees were severely bruised and swollen from days of continuous kneeling. How long has she been like this? The head paramedic demanded, looking sternly at Thomas. This girl is severely malnourished, showing signs of late-stage internal hemorrhaging, and her joints are inflamed. Who is her legal guardian? Thomas lowered his head, tears in his wrinkled eyes. Her husband is downstairs. Sir, but he's occupied. As they wheeled my gurney out through the side corridor to avoid disturbing the family in the living room, we crossed paths with Tristan in the hallway. He was holding a bowl of warm bird's nest soup, heading back toward the living room. When he saw the paramedics pushing the stretcher, he stopped, his brows knitting into a tight frown. What is this? Tristan demanded, looking at the paramedic. Who called an ambulance? I told you she was just throwing a tantrum. The head paramedic looked at Tristan, as if he were a lunatic. Sir, your wife has suffered a massive gastrointestinal or pulmonary hemorrhage. Her vital signs are critical. If we don't get her to the ICU immediately, she could go into septic shock. Tristan froze. His eyes finally landed on my face. I was wearing an oxygen mask, my skin translucent, my lips tinged a light blue. I looked less like a human being, and more like a ghost floating on white sheets. His gaze dropped down to the stretcher, then down to his own shoes. On the polished leather of his right shoe was a dark, dried reddish-black smudge. His breath hitched. Clara, are you really? Tristan. Chloe's sweet, delicate voice called out from the living room. Is everything okay out there? Who's talking? Tristan snapped his head back toward the living room, then looked at me again. He opened his mouth, hesitation flickering across his handsome face. I slowly lifted my right hand, the hand that used to prepare his morning coffee, the hand he had crushed against my throat yesterday, and pulled my oxygen mask down just enough to speak. Go feed your angel, Tristan. I whispered, my voice flat, empty of all emotion. Don't keep her waiting. Tristan's jaw twitched. A strange, suffocating look of discomfort crossed his eyes. Sir, we need to move now, the paramedic barked, pushing the gurney past him. Tristan stood in the corridor, holding the warm soup bowl, watching the elevator doors close on my pale face. He didn't follow us. At St. Jude's Hospital, the oncology chief took one look at my scans and slammed the file onto his desk. Advanced osteosarcoma with extensive pulmonary metastases, Dr. Vance said, looking at me with deep, sorrowful pity. Miss Sterling, why didn't you seek treatment sooner? The cancer has already metastasized to your lungs and spine. The pain must be unbearable. I lay on the white hospital bed, looking at the 4 drip dripping steadily into my vein. I knew, I said quietly. I just wanted to finish something first. We need to notify your family immediately, Dr. Vance said, reaching for the office phone. You need emergency palliative care, chemotherapy to manage the pain and... Don't bother, I interrupted smoothly. They are very busy right now. My sister just returned from the dead. Dr. Vance paused, looking at me in utter bewilderment. Just give me pain management, I smiled faintly. I have 11 days left. Evie. Like to spend them awake. For 3 days, the Sterling mansion was the epicenter of high society news. The headlines dominated every newspaper. The return of the Sterling angel. Chloe Sterling survives 5 years after. Tragic leap. A mother's miracle, Mrs. Sterling's illness cured by daughter's return. According to Chloe's tearful press interview, after she jumped off the cliff 5 years ago, she was washed ashore 3 miles down the coast and rescued by an elderly fishing couple. She suffered from severe amnesia and only recovered her memories last week after seeing a news broadcast about the Sterling group. The entire city wept for her. She was the ultimate tragic heroine, a girl so pure. She chose to jump off a cliff rather than displace her sister, only to be saved by divine providence. On the 4th day, my hospital room door was kicked open. Julian walked in, wearing a sharp suit, holding a stack of legal documents. Behind him stood Tristan, looking surprisingly tired, dark circles under his eyes, his demeanor cold and rigid. Julian threw the documents onto my blanket. Sign these, Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. I looked at the cover page. Deed of voluntary transfer of inheritance and asset. Waiver. What is this? I asked, not picking up the pen. Chloe is back, Julian said, leaning against the bed frame, crossing his arms. Dad decided to restore her 50% share of the Sterling family trust. Since you didn't contribute a single thing to this family for 18 years, it's only fair that you return the equity Dad assigned to you when you married Tristan. I let out a quiet laugh. And if I don't sign? Clara, stop being selfish, Tristan cut in, his voice carries a stern, reprimanding tone. Chloe lived in poverty in a fishing village for 5 years. She suffered while you enjoyed the luxury of being Mrs. Vance. Do you have no conscience at all? I looked at Tristan. A fishing village? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, a fishing village. Julian snapped. She almost starved. Her hands are covered in calluses. I pulled out my phone from under my pillow. On the screen was a high-resolution photograph sent to me by the system an hour ago. In the photo, Chloe was sitting in the VIP booth of an elite nightclub in Miami 3 months ago, wearing an ivory silk dress, holding a glass of Armand de Brignac champagne, leaning intimately against a heavily tattooed man with a gold chain. Derek Cooper, a known underground gambler and drug runner from our old high school. I turned the screen around and held it up for Julian and Tristan to see. Tell me, I said sweetly. Do fishing villages in Florida usually serve $50,000 champagne? The silence in the hospital room was deafening. Julian's eyes locked onto the screen. His expression froze, his mouth opening slightly as he stared at the crystal-clear photo. What is this? Julian stammered, grabbing my phone from my hand. Where did you get this fake picture? It's not fake, I replied calmly, adjusting my blanket. Check the metadata. Timestamp. November 14th, 3:22 a.m. Location. Clubby 11 Even, Miami. Tristan leaned over Julian's shoulder, staring at the screen. His face went pale, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle twitched violently along his cheek. He recognized Derek Cooper. Every rich kid in our high school knew Derek, the boy who had been expelled in senior year for statutory rape and extortion. This proves nothing, Julian yelled, though his voice lacked its usual arrogant confidence. Someone must have photoshopped Chloe's face onto some party girl. Chloe lost her memory. She was living with an old couple. Oh right, the old fishing couple. I smiled, leaning back against my pillows. Dr. Vance ran Chloe's medical file yesterday when your parents registered her for the family insurance update. I pulled a printed medical report from my bedside drawer and tossed it over the legal documents. According to her blood work and pelvic ultrasound, your pure angelic sister gave birth via cesarean section approximately 3 years ago, I said, looking straight into Tristan's eyes. And she currently has high levels of nicotine and synthetic amphetamines in her system. Tristan's breath caught in his throat. He snatched the medical report, his eyes scanning the certified stamp from St. Jude's Hospital. Patient, Chloe Sterling. Uterine scarring, consistent with prior lower segment. C-section. Toxicology screen. Positive for amphetamine derivatives. No. Tristan whispered, his voice trembling. No, that's impossible. She said. She said she was innocent. She said she never touched another man. She jumped off that cliff because Derek Cooper got her pregnant when she was 18. I said, every word dropping like a heavy iron weight into the quiet room. She was terrified that a DNA test during her routine physical before your engagement would reveal she wasn't a virgin, and worse, carrying a thug's baby. I looked at Julian, whose face had turned a sickly, sallow green. She didn't commit suicide for me, Julian. I said, curling my lips into a cold, beautiful smile. She ran away to have her bad boy's child, lived off his illegal gambling money until he went to prison last month, and then came home to play the tragic angel when she ran out of cash. Julian stumbled back 2 steps, hitting the wall. You're lying. You're lying. Clara, you venomous snake. How dare you slander Chloe? He raised his hand, lunging forward as if to slap me again. Touch her again, Julian, and I will personally break your arm. A low, dangerous voice growled from the doorway. Tristan stepped between us. He didn't look at Julian. He was staring at the medical report in his hands, his fingers crushing the paper until it tore. He slowly turned his head to look at me, at my gaunt face, my pale skin, my dark, unbothered eyes that looked at him as if he were a dead bug on a sidewalk. Clara. Tristan's voice was barely a rasp. Why didn't you tell us this 5 years ago? Would you have believed me? I asked softly. Tristan went dead silent. 5 years ago, if I had said Chloe ran away with a thug, he would have called me a jealous, lying monster. He would have dragged me through the mud to protect Chloe's sacred honor. You worshipped a ghost, Tristan, I said, picking up the pen from the tray. And now the ghost is back. Isn't that wonderful? I smoothly signed my name on the bottom line of the asset waiver. Clara Sterling. I pushed the papers into Tristan's chest. Take your inheritance back, I said flatly. And while you're at it, take the divorce papers from my lawyer tomorrow. I don't need a single cent from the Sterling family, nor do I need a husband who smells like another woman's lies. When Tristan and Julian returned to the Sterling mansion that evening, the grand living room was filled with laughter. Mrs. Sterling was sitting on the velvet sofa, happily showing Chloe a catalog of diamond tiaras for her upcoming welcoming gala part 2. Arthur Sterling was on the phone with the family lawyer, instructing him to transfer 20% of the Sterling Group's liquid shares directly to Chloe's personal account. Mom, Dad, look at this one, Chloe purred, her voice dripping with sweet innocence as she pointed to a 3-carat sapphire necklace. It's so pretty. But is it too expensive? Maybe we should save the money for Clara. Don't mention that ungrateful brat. Mrs. Sterling sneered, sipping her tea. She didn't even come home to see you. She's lying in a hospital room pretending to be sick just to steal our attention. Boom. The heavy mahogany front doors slammed open. Julian stood in the doorway, his tie torn off, his jacket disheveled, his face looking hollowed out. Behind him walked Tristan, his face completely devoid of expression, holding a black leather folder. Julian? Tristan? What's wrong with you boys? Mrs. Sterling frowned, setting her teacup down. Where are the transfer papers? Did Clara sign them? Julian walked slowly into the room. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at Chloe. Chloe's smile faltered slightly under her brother's dark, hollow stare. Julian, big brother? Why are you looking at me like that? Julian didn't answer. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tossed it directly onto the glass coffee table in front of his parents. The photo of Chloe in the Miami nightclub illuminated the room. Mrs. Sterling blinked. What is this? Who is that girl? That's your angel, Mom, Julian said, his voice flat, devoid of all life. That's Chloe 3 months ago in Miami, drinking $50,000 champagne with Derek Cooper. Arthur Sterling stood up, his brow furrowing in confusion. Derek Cooper? Who is that? Julian, what nonsense are you talking about? Tristan stepped forward. He set the certified medical report from St. Jude's Hospital on top of the jewelry catalog. She didn't lose her memory, Mr. Sterling, Tristan said, his voice so cold it chilled the warm living room. She gave birth 3 years ago in Florida. And she's currently addicted to amphetamines. The room went dead, suffocatingly silent. Mrs. Sterling's face turned white. What? No, that's a lie. Chloe is pure. She's a good girl. Clara forged this. Clara bought those fake papers. I checked the hospital database myself, Mrs. Sterling, Tristan interrupted, looking directly at Chloe, whose hands had begun to tremble violently beneath her cashmere blanket. The chief of oncology verified the blood work. The scar on Her abdomen is from a C-section. Arthur Sterling turned his head slowly, his eyes fixing onto Chloe like a hawk, staring at prey. Chloe, Arthur growled, his voice deep and terrifying. Is this true? Chloe's sweet, innocent expression shattered into terror. She backed away on the sofa, her lower lip quivering, tears springing to her eyes. Not the tragic tears of an angel, but the frantic, panicked tears of a caught liar. Dad, listen to me. Chloe sobbed, reaching out to grab Mrs. Sterling's hand. He forced me. Derek forced me. He kidnapped me 5 years ago. I didn't want to leave. I was scared he would hurt you guys. Kidnapped you. Tristan let out a dark, bitter laugh that sounded like glass breaking. He kidnapped you, so you spent 5 years flying back and forth between Miami and Vegas, posting photos on private Instagram accounts under the name Chloe_VIP? Tristan pulled a second stack of printed documents from his folder and threw them onto Arthur's lap. These are her bank statements for the past 5 years, Tristan said softly. She's been receiving a monthly allowance of $20,000 transferred directly from Mrs. Sterling's private reserve account. Arthur whipped his head toward his wife. What? Mrs. Sterling stammered, her face draining of all color. Arthur, I didn't know. 3 years ago, an anonymous person emailed me saying they had news about Chloe. They asked for money every month to keep her safe. I thought. You thought you were paying ransom? Tristan smirked, a look of utter disgust filling his eyes. You were paying for her luxury apartment in South Beach. Arthur Sterling looked at his wife, then looked at Chloe, and finally looked at Julian, who had collapsed onto an armchair, burying his face in his hands, weeping silently. The illusion, the sacred, beautiful, perfect fairy tale they had built for 5 years to justify abusing their biological daughter, had collapsed into a pile of rotting filth in less than 10 minutes. Where is Clara? Arthur asked, his voice shaking violently as he looked at Tristan. Where is my daughter? Tristan looked down at his own shoes. The dark, dry blood stain was still there on the leather. She's in the oncology ward at St. Jude's, Tristan whispered, his voice cracking into a ragged, broken sob. She has late-stage bone cancer. The doctor said she has less than a week to live. The hospital room was quiet, save for the rhythmic, low beep of the heart monitor. I sat by the window in a wheelchair, wearing a thick wool cardigan over my hospital gown, watching the autumn leaves drift down from the trees in the courtyard below. My skin was yellowed, my cheeks hollow, my body so frail that even the weight of the blanket felt heavy against my collarbones. The door swung open. Arthur Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, and Julian burst into the room. They didn't look like the powerful, arrogant billionaires who had ruled high society. Arthur's hair looked gray and unkempt, Mrs. Sterling's eyes were swollen shut from crying, and Julian looked like a broken ghost, his shoulders stooped, his hands trembling violently. Behind them stood Tristan, holding a massive bouquet of white gardenias, my favorite flower when I was 18, before I realized nobody in this house cared what I liked. Clara. Mrs. Sterling choked out, throwing herself onto her knees beside my wheelchair, reaching out to grab my thin, bruised hands. Clara, my baby, my poor baby. I didn't pull my hands away. I didn't have the strength to. I simply looked down at her with cold, quiet curiosity. Why are you crying, Mrs. Sterling? I asked softly. Is your spiritual fever acting up again? Mrs. Sterling winced as if I had stabbed her with a hot needle. She buried her face in my lap, sobbing hysterically. I'm sorry, Clara. Mom was wrong. I was blind. I was crazy, she wailed, her tears soaking through my blanket. The doctors told us, they said. You've been sick for months. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you suffer alone? I told you, I murmured, looking out the window. 5 days ago, I told Julian. My chest hurt. He said I was throwing a tantrum because it was Chloe's anniversary. Julian let out a strangled, wet gasp, dropping to his knees beside his mother. Clara. Julian wept, grabbing the edge of my blanket, his head bowed to the floorboards. Slap me, hit me, kill me. I was a monster to you. I ruined your chicken pot pie. I let you kneel on the hard floor for days. Get up, Julian, I said gently. You'll dirty your expensive suit. My calm, soft tone hurt them 10 times more than if I had screamed or cursed at them. It was the tone of someone who had completely detached herself from their existence. Arthur Sterling stepped forward, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking as he pulled out a gold pen and a thick document. Clara. Look, Arthur stammered, his voice breaking. I transferred everything, 100% of the Sterling Group's equity. The house, the estate, the trusts, it's all yours. Every single cent. Just sign this and I'll fly the best cancer specialists from Switzerland today. We'll save you, Dad. We'll save you. I looked at the multi-billion-dollar contract sitting on my lap. 5 years ago, I would have cried with joy to see my father look at me with such desperate concern. Now, looking at the golden seal and the endless zeros on the paper, I felt only a profound, absurd hilarity. Take it back, Mr. Sterling. I smiled faintly. I'm dying in 7 days. What am I going to do with $1 billion in a coffin? No, don't say that. Arthur sobbed, falling onto his knees alongside his wife and son. The powerful, terrifying tycoon was kneeling on the cold hospital floor, weeping like a helpless child. Please, Clara, give Dad a chance to make it up to you. Don't leave us. Tristan stepped up to the edge of my bed. He set the white gardenias on the nightstand, then dropped onto one knee in front of my wheelchair. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal our original wedding ring, the simple gold band I had left on his desk when I asked for a divorce. Clara, Tristan whispered, his dark eyes brimming with raw, agonizing tears. I tore up the divorce papers. I kicked Chloe out of the Vance estate. She's gone, Clara. She's dead to me. He reached out, his warm, shaking fingers taking my cold left hand, trying to slide the ring back onto my finger. I was wrong, Tristan wept, pressing his forehead against my frail knuckles. I thought I loved a memory, but I was just an arrogant, blind fool who hurt the only woman who ever truly cared for me. Please, let me be your husband. Let me take care of you for the time you have left. I looked down at his dark head resting against my hand. I felt the heat of his tears against my skin. System notification. Target Tristan Vance True Love Meter, 100%. System notification. Target Julian Sterling True Love Meter, 100%. System notification. Target Arthur Sterling True Love Meter, 100%. The mechanical voice chimed in my head, completely devoid of emotion. Congratulations, host. All primary targets have achieved 100% true love and remorse. Mission earning true love condition met. Do you wish to cancel the mortality protocol and remain in this world? I stared at the 3 men and the woman kneeling at my feet, weeping, begging, offering me their fortunes, their tears, and their hearts. They loved me now, because I was dying, because the fake angel was exposed, because their guilty consciences were tearing their souls apart. If Chloe hadn't been exposed, if I hadn't spat blood on Tristan's shoes, I would still be kneeling on the hard floor of the master suite, starving on plain, watery congee. Their love wasn't love. It was just horror at their own monstrous reflections. I smiled, a light, serene, breathtakingly pure smile that seemed to illuminate the dark hospital room. I spoke softly in my mind. System. Reject the mission completion. The system paused for 2 seconds. Confirmation. Host rejects life extension. Mortality protocol will proceed as scheduled. Time remaining 48 hours. Thank you, I thought. I gently pulled my hand out of Tristan's grip, letting the gold ring drop onto the floor, rolling away into the shadow beneath the bed. I don't want your love, Tristan, I said, my voice as clear and light as mountain spring water. I just wanted you all to know that I never owed you anything. The final 48 hours passed with a strange, beautiful peace. I refused all major medical interventions, allowing only low-dose morphine to ease the dull ache in my chest. The Sterlings and Tristan never left the hallway outside my room. They weren't allowed inside because I had instructed the hospital security to restrict visitors. Through the small glass window of my door, I could see them, sitting on the hard wooden benches night and day, watching me sleep. Mrs. Sterling spent 48 hours on her knees in the hospital corridor, praying to every god she knew, begging for a miracle. Julian sat against the wall, slapping his own face every time he remembered a cruel thing he had said to me, until his cheeks were bruised and bleeding. Tristan stood by the glass, staring at my face, holding a small sketchbook where I had once drawn a simple landscape of our backyard, a drawing he had thrown into the trash 2 years ago, which he had spent 12 hours retrieving from the city landfill yesterday. Downstairs, the news broke that Chloe Sterling had been formally arrested for fraud, extortion, and illegal substance possession after Derek Cooper turned her into police to reduce his own drug sentence. The Golden Girl was going to prison. The miserable shadow was going home. On the final evening, the sunset over the city was a brilliant, fiery crimson, painting the sky in shades of gold, rose, and deep purple. I sat in my bed, looking out at the sky, feeling my pulse grow slower and slower, like a clock winding down its final spring. The system's voice chimed one last time, sounding surprisingly soft, almost human. System notification. Lifespan remaining, 60 seconds. Clara. Are you afraid? I smiled, feeling a deep, breathtaking warmth spread through my chest. Not pain, but an absolute, weightless freedom. I was afraid for 23 years. I whispered in my heart. I'm not afraid anymore. 30 seconds. Through the window glass, I saw Tristan press his hands against the door, tears pouring down his face as he watched my eyes slowly begin to close. I saw Julian, screaming for the doctors, beating his fists against the locked handle. I looked at them one last time. I didn't hold hatred. I didn't hold regret. They were just strangers who had arrived too late for a show that was already over. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. 0. My breathing stopped. My hand slipped from the edge of the mattress, falling softly to my side. Outside the room, the heart monitor let out a single, continuous, unbroken tone. Beat. 3 years later. The winter snow fell heavily over the city, blanketing the grand gates of the Sterling Manor in pure, freezing white. Inside the estate there was no sound. The grand chandeliers were turned off, the luxurious velvet sofas covered in dust sheets. The house smelled of old paper, cold stone, and stale liquor. In the master study, Arthur Sterling sat in his leather armchair, staring blankly at a framed photograph of a 6-year-old girl with dark eyes sitting on a small wooden swing. The only photo taken of me before Mrs. Miller swapped the baby tags. He had retired from the Sterling Group 2 years ago. The company's stock had plummeted 40% following the family scandal, but he didn't care. Spent his days sitting in the quiet dark, refusing to speak to anyone. Mrs. Sterling lived in a private psychiatric retreat in the mountains. She spent her days sitting by a window, knitting tiny pink baby socks, weeping and calling out for Clara whenever the wind blew through the trees. Chloe was serving a 7-year sentence in a state penitentiary. Neither Arthur nor Mrs. Sterling had visited her once. In the second-floor bedroom, my old bedroom, Julian sat on the cold floor. He was thin, his eyes sunken, wearing a faded wool sweater. In his lap sat an old chipped baking dish. Every single week for 3 years, Julian had tried to bake a chicken pot pie, using the exact recipe I had left in my notebook. And every single week he would sit alone in the dark room, eating the cold pie, tears streaming down his face as he remembered the night he had smashed the hot gravy onto my arms. It tastes good, Clara. Julian wept softly into the quiet room, his voice raspy and broken. It's so good. Please come home and try a bite. The empty room offered no echo. In the coastal city of Seattle, 300 miles away, a sleek black limousine pulled up to a quiet, oceanfront cemetery overlooking the Pacific. Tristan Vance stepped out of the car. He wore a dark coat, his hair streaked with silver at the temples, looking 20 years older than his 30 years. He carried a single bouquet of fresh, white gardenias. He walked down the snow-covered stone path until he reached a simple, elegant, marble headstone standing under a tall pine tree. On the marble surface were carved 2 lines. Clara Sterling, she asked for nothing, and left with everything. Tristan knelt in the cold snow, setting the gardenias gently beside the stone. He pulled off his leather glove, his trembling fingers reaching out to trace the carved letters of my name. On his right hand, he wore a simple gold band, the ring I had dropped on the hospital floor 3 years ago. He had spent 3 months searching the hospital's waste disposal until he found it. I brought the flowers, Clara, Tristan whispered, his voice catching in his throat as the icy ocean wind blew past his coat. The gardenias from the estate. I planted a whole garden of them for you. He rested his forehead against the cold marble stone, tears falling onto the snow, freezing into tiny crystal beads. Every night for 3 years, whenever he closed his eyes, he heard my quiet, unbothered voice echoing in his mind. I don't want your love, Tristan. I just wanted you all to know that I never owed you anything. He had everything money could buy, billions in assets, corporate power, social prestige. And he was condemned to spend the rest of his long, empty life sitting in a palace of ice, forever haunted by the memory of the girl who had looked at his heart and found it completely worthless. The winter wind howled over the cliffs, sweeping the soft snow across the quiet grave, covering the white gardenias in a blanket of pure, unbroken silence.